It was just another day in my neighborhood, or so I thought. But then something happened that I never saw coming, something that would not only put my personal property at risk, but could also threaten the safety of my entire community. I'm talking about the moment when my HOA Karen decided to cut the power to my cold storage unit. Sounds harmless, right? Well, not exactly. You see, what she didn't know is that this wasn't just any ordinary storage space. Inside that unit was a carefully organized stash of emergency supplies, supplies meant to help our community survive in case of a state emergency. But none of that mattered to her. She had her own reasons, and none of them had anything to do with the bigger picture. As I stood there trying to process what had just happened, I realized the situation was way bigger than I expected. This wasn't just about petty HOA drama. It was about the safety of every person in my neighborhood. How far would this HOA Karen go to enforce her rules? And what was really at stake here? Stay tuned to find out what happens next, and trust me, you're not going to want to miss what unfolds from here. To understand why this was such a big deal, I need to give you a bit of background. My cold storage wasn't just for storing a few leftover groceries. It held dozens of critical supplies, canned food, medical kits, water filtration systems, and even some items for neighbors who might need help if the worst ever came. In a state emergency, these supplies could literally make the difference between life and death. So when I got the notification from the utility company saying my power had been cut, my stomach dropped. I immediately called the HOA office to figure out what happened. That's when I was told about the decision made by none other than Karen, the HOA board member, who's made it her mission to enforce every little rule, no matter how ridiculous. Karen's known for being overbearing, but I never thought she'd go this far. Apparently, my cold storage violated some obscure clause in the HOA guidelines about non-residential uses of property. No warning, no discussion, she just made the call. As I stood there, staring at the power meter, I started wondering, was she doing this out of spite, or was there something more behind it? And why didn't anyone else seem to be stepping in? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something crucial. What was she really up to, and how far was she willing to go to make her point? To understand why this was such a big deal, I need to give you a bit of background. My cold storage wasn't just for storing a few leftover groceries. It held dozens of critical supplies, canned food, medical kits, water filtration systems, and even some items for neighbors who might need help if the worst ever came. In a state emergency, these supplies could literally make the difference between life and death. So when I got the notification from the utility company saying my power had been cut, my stomach dropped. I immediately called the HOA office to figure out what happened. That's when I was told about the decision made by none other than Karen, the HOA board member, who's made her mission to enforce every little rule, no matter how ridiculous. Karen's known for being overbearing, but I never thought she'd go this far. Apparently, my cold storage violated some obscure clause in the HOA guidelines about non-residential uses of property. No warning, no discussion, she just made the call. As I stood there, staring at the power meter, I started wondering, was she doing this out of spite, or was there something more behind it? And why didn't anyone else seem to be stepping in? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something crucial. What was she really up to, and how far was she willing to go to make her point? The more I thought about it, the more questions popped into my head. I had lived in this neighborhood for years and had never once run into trouble with the HOA. Sure, Karen had been a stickler about the tiniest things. Your lawn had to be trimmed just so. Your trash cans couldn't be visible from the street, but nothing like this. I had a feeling that cutting my power wasn't about a storage unit or breaking any rules. Something felt personal, and I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in the back of my mind. I tried reaching out to other neighbors, hoping someone might have noticed something strange, or, at the very least, be willing to help me fix this. But what I found was equally disturbing. A few neighbors were too scared to speak up, afraid of Karen's influence over the HOA board. Others were too focused on their own issues to get involved. It felt like I was all alone in this battle, And the longer I thought about it, the more it became clear that Karen's power went beyond just one petty act of retaliation. She had some kind of hold over the HOA, and no one dared to challenge her. I couldn't just sit back and let this go. But the more I dug into the rules, the more confusing it became. Some clauses made sense, but others felt like they were written just to control people like me. And the fact that Karen seemed to be above all the rules, that was starting to feel like the biggest problem of all. The worst part, I still didn't know if she even realized what she was messing with. Did she know that my cold storage wasn't just a personal project, but a lifeline for our community in case of an emergency? Or was she so blinded by her need for control that she couldn't see the bigger picture? Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, they did. A few days after the power was cut, I got an unexpected knock on my door. It was Officer Daniels from the local police department. My first thought was that maybe Karen had reported me for some new, ridiculous violation. But when he started talking, I realized I was in way deeper than I had imagined. He told me that there had been a concern raised about the supplies in my cold storage. At first, I thought he meant the HOA, but then he dropped the bomb. The state had been alerted. Apparently, someone had tipped them off, claiming that I was stockpiling supplies in preparation for a disaster, and that it could be seen as a potential security threat. The authorities were getting involved. My stomach twisted with confusion and panic. Who would have done that? Who would report someone trying to help their community? It hit me like a ton of bricks. Was this Karen's doing, or was there something even more sinister going on? Had she gone as far as contacting the state, or was someone else pulling the strings? Either way, the stakes had just escalated. The more I thought about it, the more it became clear that there was something bigger happening behind the scenes. I wasn't just dealing with petty HOA drama anymore. I was in the middle of a larger game, and I had no idea who was playing it or what their end goal was. But one thing was for sure, I had to figure it out before it was too late. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and meetings. I couldn't believe how quickly things had spiraled out of control. But as the pressure built, I knew one thing for sure. I had to get to the bottom of this, and fast. So I decided to confront Karen directly. It was time to find out if she was the one pulling the strings, or if someone else had a hidden agenda. I caught up with her at an HOA meeting, trying to keep my cool, but everything in me screamed for answers. She was sitting at the head of the table, as smug as ever, and when I approached, she barely acknowledged me. It wasn't until I calmly mentioned the state's involvement that her expression changed, just for a split second. There was a flicker of something behind her eyes, something I couldn't quite place. "You have no idea what you're up against," she said cryptically, before quickly shifting the conversation back to trivial matters. That's when I realized something chilling. She wasn't the mastermind, but she knew exactly who was behind all of this. I left that meeting feeling more confused than ever, but I wasn't done yet. I started digging deeper, looking into local government connections, and piecing together a pattern of strange coincidences. It all came together when I uncovered that the HOA had been working in secret with a private company, one that specialized in emergency preparedness and had been trying to gain control of local storage facilities. My cold storage had become a target because it was a perfect example of someone trying to be self-reliant during a crisis. But here's the real twist. The person behind the tip-off to the state wasn't Karen. It was my own neighbor, Mr. Harris. He worked for that company. He'd been watching my cold storage for months, waiting for the right moment to report me. As I confronted him, the truth came spilling out. His company wanted to force homeowners to buy overpriced emergency supplies from them, and anyone who didn't play by their rules was considered a threat. The feeling of betrayal hit hard, but at least I finally had the answers. In the end, I managed to get the power restored and fight off their influence. Barely. But as I walked away from that confrontation, one thought stuck with me. Who else in this neighborhood was working behind the scenes, pulling strings for their own gain? It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. After everything unfolded, things didn't magically return to normal. The damage had been done, and I wasn't the only one affected. The HOA was forced to hold a public meeting where a lot of neighbors who had been too afraid to speak up before started to voice their concerns. It became clear that this whole situation wasn't just about a cold storage unit. It was about control, manipulation, and greed. Many of us were left questioning the true intentions behind the HOA's actions. And that was when it hit me. Mr. Caldwell wasn't just some quiet neighbor. He was part of the bigger operation. The same people behind the fake enforcer, the same ones pulling the strings. The FBI was already in too deep, and we'd stumbled into something far more dangerous than anyone could have anticipated. Caldwell's job had always been to ensure the operation ran smoothly. He'd been watching us, watching me and my dad, for months, making sure we never got too close to the truth. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't move. Caldwell had already seen the fear in our eyes. "You're going to forget all of this," he said coldly. "If you don't, things will get a lot worse." And just when I thought everything was over, the fake enforcer, still paralyzed by Caldwell's device, mouthed one last word: "Help." That was when I realized it wasn't over. Caldwell wasn't the only one who had been playing the game. Someone else was watching, and they weren't going to let either of us leave without paying the price. I didn't know who they were or what they wanted, but I could feel the walls closing in. The whole world felt like it was shifting beneath our feet. Then, just as Caldwell began to walk away, a car screeched to a halt at the end of the street. And this time, it wasn't the FBI. It was someone else entirely, someone far worse.